For me, October is the best month for everything spooky. Spooky stories, that creepy atmosphere, the leaves changing, the crackling fire, all that sort of thing. And so I have quite a few spooky stories that I've never told before, and so I'm going to tell some of them this month. I'm going to start off today with a story from childhood. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing really well today. I am here to bring you this month some of my spooky stories that I don't think I've shared anywhere. If you know me in real life, you've probably heard some of them, but if you don't, then some of these might be fun for you over the forthcoming October. Now, to those of you who've followed me since my haunted house era, when I lived in a house that was what I believe to be haunted, you'll have heard some of the stories from within my spooky haunted house, and fear not, I have some that I promised to share and I've just not got around to doing it yet. Some of them are a bit creepy and I didn't really want to share them for a while, but I feel like I've not lived there for long enough now, so I'm going to talk about some of them later on in the month. But this one is a story from childhood, and what makes this one a little bit different is that although I'm in the story, I didn't experience it myself. This is a story that was passed on to me from my family members, and I didn't find out about it till years after the event. But I'm going to tell you about it anyway because, as I say, I'm sort of loosely involved. So a little while back, a few weeks ago, I shared a video about when I had some friends over at my house when I was a teenager, and some silly paranormal investigation on our hands went completely wrong. And I said in the video that it wasn't the first time that something weird had happened in there. And I'm going to share what I was alluding to in that video here now. Now, just to get the disclaimer out of the way, I know that not everybody believes in the paranormal, not everybody enjoys paranormal story times. If that's you, then you probably don't really want to watch this video. I can't prove what happened because I wasn't there, and again, this isn't my story, this is a story of the family members who were there at the time, and there are some bits that I'll add in later on that I was partial to, but I can't really speak to the actual 100% validity of the recollections of family members, but I'm just going to tell you what I was told because everybody loves a spooky ghost story, and when I heard this one, it really creeped me out. Now, I will say these stories from my childhood and before, they are, I believe, linked to a starting point, and I'm not going to talk about what that starting point is because, quite frankly, it's not my story to tell. It's my family's story, but also the events are Googleable. And should I lay out some information here that could kind of possibly explain some of what was going on, a quick Google would tell you exactly where I lived. And for obvious reasons, it's not great to give away that level of information online, and so I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is there was a starting point to some of these stories when I was younger, and again, the same thing for my creepy haunted house that I later lived in. Some of the things that I said I can't tell you about at the time, I still can't tell you about because, again, some of the events are Googleable. And should I tell you about these things, as much as I'd love to share, for the one or two individuals who take things a bit far, you would easily be able to Google and find out exactly where I lived, and it wouldn't be hard to sort of track down a lot of very personal information about me and my family, and so I keep certain things back. So this story does have a beginning, but moving on from the beginning, which is Googleable, we'll fast forward to the point where I was about 7 or 8 years old, and we were living in this sort of, imagine sort of a Victorian style house. And we were living in the northeast of England in this Victorian style house. It was in an area where people were traditionally working class, and there were a lot of other neighbours about, and it was sort of your traditional Victorian style house. There was a rather large sitting room, a dining room, a kitchen, a utility room and a bathroom downstairs, and then up the stairs there were 3 bedrooms and another bathroom, and that was our Victorian style house. And it was all very high ceilings and rather large windows because it was it was Victorian. We'd been living in this house since I was about a year old, and it was a decent house. Like, we all liked it, we were all happy in there. But unknown to me, things would happen in my room all of the time when I wasn't home. Now, I'm talking about things like you could hear me running across the floorboards, and it was sort of the same style as my actual run. It sounded like me running around on the floorboards, and you could hear it from downstairs, because in the main sitting room, straight up above, was my bedroom. And I didn't have any clue that this was happening, but this had been a phenomena that had been going on since I was little. And my parents only realised that it was actually happening once I started school, because once I started school, I wasn't in the house. And so when they would hear what sounded like my footsteps running around upstairs, I wasn't home. And they knew I wasn't home. Now, this was back in the time where everybody would just come knocking on your door and just come in. I remember our house was always full of people just popping in for a cup of tea and then leaving. It was that sort of way then where people would just show up at your door. It doesn't seem to happen anymore, but it was that sort of era. There was always an auntie had popped over, or one of my mum's friends or one of my dad's friends had shown up. There was always somebody would be downstairs having a cup of tea. And so one of the main visitors to our house was my grandma. She would come over every day on her way back from the shops. She would sort of walk down to the local shops, and then on her way back, you would pass our house to get to hers. So she would call in for a cup of tea. And both my grandma and my parents have said later on that they would often hear what sounded like me running around upstairs, playing, or even coming down the stairs. And they just became used to it. Now, they lied about this for years and years, because sometimes I would be in that bedroom and I would hear things in my room, and all sorts of weird things would happen. Like, I can remember my TV would switch itself on sometimes. Sometimes my bedroom door would open, my cupboard door would open, and my parents would always tell me, oh, it's the wind. Your bedroom door is made of a lighter wood than everyone else's door, so if the windows are open, your bedroom door's going to open. I later found out that that was a load of rubbish, and they just told me that just to keep me sleeping in the haunted bedroom, which... thanks, Mum. But had I known about this would have scared the living daylights out of me, and I don't think I would have ever gone back into my bedroom ever again. So probably it makes a good reason as to why they didn't tell me. But the story takes place on a usual Tuesday. I was at school, and my grandma was coming up the back lane towards my house. And as she approached the house, she noticed that I was standing in my bedroom window. So my grandma obviously wondered why I was off school that day, and she apparently waved to me, and I just dead-eye stared her down. And she said she tried to wave to me a couple of times and wanted to know why I wasn't waving back at her. I was just staring, like dead staring, straight down from the window, down at her. And so my grandma came into the house and asked my mum why I wasn't at school and why I was standing weirdly at the window just staring down. And my grandma was quite perplexed by this point, because she said I was just looking at her in a really creepy way, and she said I was making eye contact. So she said I know she saw me, but she wouldn't wave or anything. And my mum, listening to this, let her finish before telling her that it was absolutely impossible because I was at school. And so my grandma apparently didn't believe her at all and insisted on checking, because my grandma thought, there's no way, I saw her at the window. She was at the window, so she must have snuck home. Bear in mind I was about 7, so of course I didn't sneak home, but my grandma was absolutely 100% convinced that she had been looking at me in my bedroom window. Now, where my grandma would have entered my back garden to get up to the house, she would have been right by my window, just up. It wasn't like she was seeing me from far away. She would have been seeing me pretty damn close up. I wish I could describe to you exactly how it looked, but she would have been able to really make eye contact with me. Like, you would have been able to see everything about me from where she would have been stood. I don't know who she saw at the window, but it wasn't me. So my grandma and my mum went up the stairs. My dad wasn't in, he was at work. And they went upstairs to check to see where I was. Now, my mum knew I wasn't there because my mum had dropped me off at school, but my grandma was absolutely 100% convinced I was in that room. And according to my mum and my grandma later, they had gone through my bedroom, my grandma had gone through every single cupboard, and then they searched the rest of the upstairs of the house, because in order to have come downstairs, I would have had to have walked through the living room where they were, because that's where the door was. So I would have had to have walked straight through where they were. So they knew I hadn't come downstairs, and they knew they hadn't passed me on the stairs. So they were checking all through the rooms. Again, my mum knew this was absolutely fruitless. She knew that I wasn't in, but she let my grandma have a good look anyway. And they sat downstairs, and my grandma was scratching her head and just couldn't figure it out. And as they were having a cup of tea, they then heard my bedroom door open and footsteps running around upstairs. And so they went back upstairs again to have a look. No one there. Bedroom door wasn't open. And my grandma was just completely perplexed by this. But that wasn't the only time that this happened. This went on for years. Now, I left that house when I was about 21-ish. I moved out. I can't remember the exact age I was, but I was there for the rest of my childhood. And various neighbours and other people had come to my mum over the time and asked if I was doing all right, because apparently people spotted me at different points standing in that window looking out. Now, we're talking as I grew, so did whatever they were seeing grew. Because neighbours who knew me and would see me day in, day out, relatives who knew me, are not going to mistake the image of a child, which is what my grandma had seen at the time. My grandma at the time had seen what looked like a 7-8-year-old child standing in the window, which was me. It was me, she said. It was 100% me. And as the years went by, people spotted me in the window. Now, I was completely oblivious to this. I knew nothing about this until I moved out. It was when I moved out that I found out. And had I known, I don't think I would have slept in that room. I don't know why no one told me. I don't know how they all managed to keep it hidden from me over the years, but they did. And as I grew older, whatever they were seeing grew older too. So as far as I'm aware, the first sighting of whatever it was in the window was that day. My grandma coming home and seeing someone out the window. But the descriptions were always the same. It was always me. For some reason, I always had my hair down, and I've always had long hair. I've always had really long hair. And I would be stood in the window with my hair down and hanging over my shoulders, almost Morticia Addams style, and just staring people down, weirdly, just staring people down. And that was seen several times over the years, each time when I wasn't in the house, and it grew older each time. Now, the first time I had anything to do with this was the time in the story where I mentioned a little while ago, the story where I had my friend stay over and she saw me leaning over the edge of the bed at her. If you haven't seen that video, you really need to watch it. It was a very creepy story time. But that was the first time I was ever actually involved in it. The first time that I even heard of it happening. And I really thought my friend was completely making it up until after I moved out, which was years after the event with me and my friend took place. It all made horrible, horrible sense that what she had seen was possibly the same, whatever it was, that was looking out of the window at people from my bedroom. And the day, I'll never forget the day that they told me what it was, but the day happened where I had moved out and I came to my mum's house one day for a cup of tea, and I was sitting in there having a cup of tea, and my dad was out, my brother was out, and it was just me and my mum. And as we were sat there just drinking a cup of tea and chatting, there was this almighty bang from what used to be my bedroom. Now, I'm talking a big bang because as I looked up, as the bang happened, as I looked up, the light above us, the light fixture was sort of shaking from side to side. So something had banged on that floor. And I looked at my mum and said, is my brother home? Obviously I use his name, but I'm not going to put that online. I said, is he home? And she said, oh no, he's not. And she just she just was completely nonplussed. And I said to her, well, what was that? Who's upstairs? And she said, oh, there's no one upstairs. And I don't know why she dragged it out. It was almost like a horrific grand reveal. But then I said to her, well, who was that then? And then, as if by magic, there was the sounds of someone walking across the floorboards up ahead. And I just looked at my mum and I said, there's someone in the house. There's someone in. There's someone here. And she said, no, it's not. That always happens when you're not in. And I just looked at her and went, what do you mean that always happens when I'm not in? And she went, oh yeah, that always happens when you're not in. And she just proceeded to tell me the story there and then. And I was absolutely shocked. I was just sat there like, really? So for the last sort of 15 year or so then, even longer, it would have been longer. It would have been like for the last 19 year or whatever, you've let me sleep in that room and how did I not know? And the thing is, until that point, until I'd moved out, I had never heard that. Every time I'd been downstairs, I'd never heard it. It was always when I wasn't in the house. I had never seen it. I still haven't seen it. I still haven't seen whatever it was. And I don't know if it is still there, because we've all moved. So none of us live there anymore, and my parents have moved away, and I don't know who lives there anymore. But I don't know what that was. I don't know why it looked like me, and I don't know why it only happened when I wasn't in the house. I have absolutely no explanation for it, and I've never heard of that happening before. I've never heard of a ghost that looks like you before. I can only assume it's some sort of paranormal situation brought on by what I alluded to at the beginning of this video, the very Googleable event that, yeah, I can't go into, but I can only assume it was something to do with that. But I feel like it was paranormal, but obviously, well, not obviously because you don't know what happened, but it had nothing to do with my family, whatever it was. And I don't know why it grew with me, why it continued to look like me, or why it would just stare at people out of the window. It's a creepy and bizarre thing to happen. I will say my mum and my dad never ever once saw it in the window, but my grandma did and other relatives did. Yeah, so that is my creepy paranormal story time that I kind of was involved in, but kind of wasn't, because I wasn't aware it was going on around me, but it looked like me. So I kind of feel like I was involved, even though I wasn't. But I would love to know if anybody else has ever experienced anything like this, or has heard of anything like this. I have no explanation for it. I've never heard of anything like that before. But it's weird. It's very, very weird. And I have no explanation. So I'd love to know if anybody has, or if anybody has had anything like this happen to them. And yeah, that's my first story for the beginning of this spooky month. And yeah, I will speak to you all soon. Bye for now.